Welcome to this edition of Upshot from telecomengine.com. Today we're speaking with Dr. Nicola Millard, who's Head of Customer Insight and Futures for BT Global Innovation Team. Nicola, thank you for your time. We'd like to know a little bit about your role with BT and a story behind a white paper that you've recently released from which you're going to share some insights and key findings.
Hello, I'm part of BT Global Services, so we're the bit British Telecom, British Telecommunications. So of course we're based in the UK, but we are global. We work in 170 countries around the world, mostly serving very large global multinational corporates. So my role, I'm actually part of our innovation team. So the role of the team is really to start to bring a lot of the research and innovation that we do in BT really forward into our large global corporates. So we don't innovate alone. We very much innovate with them rather than do innovation to them. And really, we have actually a really fantastic research organisation behind us. So we're the third biggest investor in R&D in the UK. We're the third biggest fixed line telecoms investor in the world. And for the past few years, one of my major projects has been on the future of work, which in itself is an incredibly large topic. So I've been looking at sort of the trends driving the future of work, and obviously one of them is the fact that that telecoms and technology is untethering us. I'm actually sitting on a mobile phone outside at the moment, so you may hear birdsong. So I don't have to sit in an office to work anymore. I can choose wherever I work, whenever I work, and that's brilliant, but it also has a number of challenges around it, and that's where the collaboration conundrum really came in, because technology is untethering us from our desks. It is allowing us to work globally and virtually, but is there something missing in the way that we collaborate if we don't see the people that we collaborate with on a daily basis? Is that problematic? Is our inner caveman, I keep saying our own personal wiring has not been updated lately. I haven't got brain 2.0 yet. Might come, but you know, my brain actually grew up in tribes, so I saw people on a daily basis. I trusted people I saw, and I collaborated with those people. I think when you're in a large global multinational now, indeed I am, actually it's a luxury often to see the people that you work with, because the people that you work with could be absolutely anywhere around the world and in any time zone around the world. So the collaboration conundrum is basically saying we can untether people, we can allow people to work absolutely anywhere, but what do we need to think about on a people basis? What are the people aspects that we need to think about when we're implementing collaboration technologies? Because just, you know, as Kevin Costner said once, if you build it, they will come. That's not necessarily the case with collaboration technologies. We may need to look at people, at process, as well as technology to solve these collaboration conundrums. So that's why we looked at the white paper, the Collaboration Conundrum.
Thank you. That was an interesting introduction to the topic, and I can't help but be curious the extent to which these results, and even as you're working on this from the perspective of a service provider for these global multinational corporations, you are one as well. Lessons has BT itself learned from this that may impact the way you manage your workforce or business culture?
That's an interesting one, because it's one that's preoccupied us for a number of years. So I've worked for BT for actually 25 years now, a very long time. Obviously, I joined when I was 6, but in that time, we have completely formed the way that we worked. And during the 1990s, for example, we were one of the first European companies to embrace home working, and it worked brilliantly for us. At the time, we were rationalising down our office buildings, and we needed to do more with less. We encountered the same problems. Home working is absolutely brilliant for people if they want to concentrate, if they've got caring obligations, if they need to sort of work very flexibly. It suits a lot of people. It doesn't suit anyone. I have to say I'm the world's worst home worker. I hate it. I don't particularly like working on my own all the time. I think it is a discipline that you need, but those that like it love it. We get about 20% extra productivity out of those guys. So we learnt those lessons early, but we also learnt that we needed to understand what were the requirements of our workers, how could we help them to work in the way that they wanted to work, as well as the way that we got the maximum productivity out of them. And actually it boiled down to the importance of leadership here. because leaders really do need to change the way that they lead when they're managing virtual teams. So if you're managing people you don't see on a daily basis, it's a discipline. I keep saying it's actually good leadership, to be honest. And when you look at collaboration, as I said earlier, it's not a magic wand you can wave. People don't magically start to collaborate. Even if you force them together in an office, they don't magically start to cooperate. So one of the things that we've certainly learned from this research is that for collaboration to happen, you need to create purpose. And that's one very big thing that we need to look at in terms of leadership for collaboration. It's all about creating purpose. But then we look at things like the leadership skills that we need. And I think leadership itself is changing in a virtualized organization. It's going much less towards command and control and much more towards connecting people and creating that purpose so that they can collaborate. But that's a very different skill set to the skill set that we typically reward and promote at the moment. These are more conundrums that we start to unearth. Are we rewarding the right behaviors? Are we naturally good at collaborating? Because actually the research points towards about 1 in 4 of us are natural collaborators. The rest of us aren't very good at it, but can we teach it as a skill? And obviously the technology underpins that, so we need to teach people how to use the technology effectively. But we also need to maybe change the way that we reward people and the way that we train our managers to emphasize a lot more around collaboration and indeed leading by example as well. So using those collaboration tools with teams rather than collaborating in a very traditional way, but expecting the rest of the team to adopt new collaboration technology. So I think there's all sorts of things that we've discovered, and you're right, you know, these are lessons we need to learn in BT, but they're equally lessons that we can share with our big, large corporates.
So in the collaboration process today, it seems that as much as ever, it's not just collaboration within your team in your company, but you are often required to interact with and produce results with a team that may include partners or other contractors or suppliers in the technology initiative, for instance. So I'm curious if you've explored the collaboration conundrum in respect to multi-team collaboration.
Absolutely, and that again was one of the trends coming out of the future of work. You can't do things yourself. Inevitably implies that you're going to be working with multiple companies, multiple supply chains, and collaboration becomes more and more important. That's another reason why we wanted to really focus in on the collaboration piece as part of our research, because I don't think we necessarily understand how collaboration works. And my feeling at the very beginning was, you know, we're a network service provider, so our network carries collaboration. So if we could start to marry the technical bit, so understanding how our network carries collaborative activities, could we then marry that as a psychologist? Could we then marry that with an understanding of the pragmatic ways in which we start to collaborate and communicate? And regardless of, you know, whether it's our direct team, colleagues, or across boundaries, across company boundaries, I think the principles are often the same. It's all humans collaborating. So I think, you know, as part of the innovation team and as part of a research project, this is an interesting an interesting conundrum in itself. How can we start to marry the technical capabilities of a telecoms provider with an innovation function that I represent, and also an understanding of how collaboration really works, and actually tapping into some of the really interesting research, for example, that's going on at MIT, for example, with Sandy Pentland, doing some incredible work around social physics to try and understand, you know, marrying big data with network analysis to try and figure out how collaboration actually works in the real world. So tapping into research from them, into London Business School, into Cass Business School, all of them are doing really interesting aspects of research. So, I mean, we're at the beginning of a journey here, but I think that's why it's called the conundrum. Well, we haven't got many of the solutions. We've got a lot of the questions at the moment, and we're certainly focusing in on how do we get the data to try and understand this fundamental thing. But I think it's so relevant now because we are generally working with people we don't see on a daily basis, and we don't necessarily see and trust instantly. So how can we potentially enhance our technologies to help us to do that?
If I could just ask one last question then, where you mentioned, you described the intention to marry, that you know, your function there, or you see your objective is to find a way to marry what's going on with collaboration and what some may refer to as digital transformation with the actual business operations or culture, workflows, et cetera, at your company, BT. If you're not ready to really start mapping that out, what are the next steps? Where do you go from here?
Well, we are in a discovery phase in certain aspects. We're not in others. So in other words, most of us are already working in a mode where we are working virtually in virtualized, globalized teams and are using an immense number of collaboration tools, ranging from really rich ones like video. And video, actually, we're seeing is a really good way of building trust amongst teams. But it's not necessarily the most accessible tool. And if you're working globally in an unfriendly time zone, at 4 in the morning, probably the last thing you want to do is go on a video conference. So for a start, you have to get out of bed and do your makeup and clean your lounge and, generally dress the top half of you. So, that's a lot of work. We're certainly looking at things, platforms like voice. Now, we often underestimate voice as a collaboration tool, but we are actually very good at collaborating using voice. The trouble is that often we're using audio conferencing tools where there's always a heavy breather, there's always someone on a train, there's always two people we can't tell apart. And I'm British, so obviously I never say what I mean, and it's all in the intonation and irony and sarcasm. And unless you have really high definition voice, a lot of that's going to bypass you, which is why we've been innovating with the likes of Dolby, for example, is a very good example of this on audio platforms. So we've put Dolby technologies, the same kind of stuff you get in surround sound cinema, into audio conferencing. So kill the heavy breather by using noise cancelling technology, not literally, although that's tempting. You can separate people in space. So Bob might come from the left, Bill might come from the right. They might sound the same, but we can differentiate them. And then the high definition can gloriously highlight my sarcasm. So that kind of thing. We're already, that's in our portfolio already. We're already seeing that enhances the productivity of meetings, largely because we don't have to work quite so hard. Our brains don't have to work quite so hard literally processing noise. Although I say inherently it doesn't make the meeting more interesting. And again, that boils down to good leadership. So who's leading the meeting will probably depend on how good the meeting is. All we can do with the technology is sort of try and remove the things that would inhibit you having a good meeting. So there's certainly stuff that we're doing around that. And then obviously there's a whole load of other things in the digital space, ranging from web jams. We've got the interesting social media within enterprise. Most of it's failing at the moment, but that's largely because there's no purpose to it. When it does succeed, we can see purpose and social networks. So how do we create purpose? And that's down to leadership. And then obviously we're starting in the innovation space to look at, could we use things like virtual reality technologies or augmented reality technologies to actually start to help this process as well. So although in some senses we're at the beginning of a discovery process, in other senses we're working on a live laboratory, if you like. So there are people actually using these tools and working in very different ways. So I think we're sort of doing a mixture of things, as is always the case with our innovation work. Some of it's very practical, can be implemented now. Other bits and pieces we've got our research guys looking at to sort of say, well, what can we do to make this work better? And actually, one of the most interesting ideas that's been thrown around is the fact that if collaboration is so important within an organisation and requires some culture changes, do we need a chief collaboration officer? So we've got chief customer officers all over the place at the moment, because that's important. Do we need a chief collaboration officer as well that looks across the company and makes sure that collaboration is working well? I think that's an interesting question, because at the moment no one owns collaboration. Well, the IT guys put it in, but HR don't own it, group comms don't own it, marketing don't own it. No one owns it. So that's a big question. If it's important, should someone own it? So I think, as I said, there's a lot of questions, but I think largely a lot of this is happening now.
It sounds like BT is really playing as best it can a leadership role, and is able to demonstrate many of the principles that you're talking about. And a great opportunity to learn from you more about the work that you're doing and what you anticipate lying ahead for your customers. Thank you, Dr. Nicola Millard, from BT's Global Innovation Team, and hope you'll join us again soon for another episode of Upshot.